is Jonathan Lane from Fan Film Factor, and today I'm here with Mr. Craig Sheeler, the showrunner behind Star Trek's Secret Voyage, which came out with its first episode back in 2012, and then its second episode in 2014. If you haven't watched the two parts of Secret Voyage yet, please do, because we will be giving away spoilers, folks. Some of them pretty major. And with that, let me say a big welcome, Craig, to Fan Film Factor, and let's start off by learning a little bit about you. Where are you from? What do you do for a living? And how did you become a big fan of Star Trek?
Born and raised in the Las Vegas Valley during the 60s, and what a great time to grow up. Sci-fi had invaded prime time as well as Saturday morning. Just loved that. As a matter of fact, I have posters in my office of Saturday morning sci-fi shows of the 70s and sci-fi shows of the 60s and sci-fi from the 50s. I'm a big fan of all of that. Just a Vegas kid during the 60s, having grown up when, Robbie Robot, they did a whole float for him during the 60s, late 50s to 60s, coming down the strip on a float. And I have pictures from that, even though I wasn't alive during the 50s. And then the 60s, my father was heavily involved in an organization that used to put on a state fair here. And so for a whole week, I got to go and hang out with the Lost in Space robot. So every day I would just go sit there and listen. The original actor who was in there, his name escapes me for a minute.
Yeah, I think that was Bob May. I could be wrong. I suppose we can look it up later on the internet.
So the original actor was in the suit, and I didn't even notice, when I go back and look at the photos now, the dome was wrong, and, because they basically pulled this thing out of mothballs and just put it in a booth. And in one hand he held a bucket to get to donations for Jerry's kids, and another one he would just shake hands, right? And I'm in there every day with my brother because my dad was working the fair, and so we would go hang out, we'd go pick up stuff, and one time, I'm looking underneath the vents of the torso, and I'm looking at I can almost see the guy in there. And he turns around and whacks me with that iron claw, and I got a fat lip. So I have a fat lip from the Lost in Space robot. And later, matter of fact, I had contacted the actor, and I said, I'd love to get signed. And he didn't want to contact me. I'm worried maybe he thought I was going to sue him or something from the fat lip, but I shared it with him my story. But just a huge fan of sci-fi during growing up and everything. And during high school, my parents moved out to Boulder City, which is just outside of Vegas, about 30 miles. And I graduated there, met my wife in high school, and moved back to Vegas for a little bit. And then 15 years ago, we moved back to Boulder City because it's a nice small community, and that's actually where I filmed Secret Voyage, was out there because it's a lot of desert area, and I could control the environment a lot better than somewhere outside of Vegas. But my background's in graphic production and printing. And I worked for various advertising agencies, taught classes at the local state college. But for years, my passion's always been like productions and film. And I remember as a child, I'd put together these live presentations in my neighborhood, like puppet shows. I had like all these Sesame Street puppets, and I put together Sesame Street live for the neighborhood kids. And I even put together some sci-fi plays at my elementary school. Just always just wanting to entertain, and had fantasies of building like a spaceship in my backyard and bringing the kids in to see it, and never did it though. And then up until about 5 years ago, I've never really even considered exploring video or photography professionally. I mean, I went to photo shoots, I art directed those things, I understood framing in a camera. And I used that. Matter of fact, I have pursued being a comic book artist for a short period of time. And my friend and I, we used to draw these comic series. I drew like 5 or 6 of these comics. And I remember taking them to the local comic book store and actually having them looked over by many of the top comic artists, like George Perez. And one of the things that they looked at my stuff and said, your storytelling, you need some work on your storytelling in your panels. But the way you lay out these pages is awesome. And I'm going, I don't understand what you're saying. All I'm hearing you say is I'm not going to be a comic book artist. I didn't understand what he meant by design and layout until I graduated high school and started looking at what I want to do in college. Do I want to be an artist? Do I want to sit there and draw trees in the cold? Or, how do I make money at this? And then I fell into graphic technology and advertising, and that's when it all started coming together about layout and composition and things like that. But, video is much different than photography, and it's just setting up one shot. You've got to set up a series of them, and then they all have to fit together, and So I was really a novice with all of that, but I enjoyed it. And so that was where, so for the last 7 years, I've been just focusing on developing understanding of lighting and photography and lenses and frame rate and now even special effects. So it's been a bit of a journey, but always guided towards creative, and now from print media to now motion media.
Now, is this something you're still doing as a hobby, or are you transitioning into doing it more professionally?
Where I work, we purchased some video cameras, but when we purchased them at the time, I wasn't involved in the purchase because I didn't understand it enough to spend that kind of money. But so we've had this equipment, and as I've been over the last couple of years, right away, the first couple of years of starting to work with this equipment, I started finding out what was working and what wasn't. And so where it was initially a graphic arts position, I'm to the point now where they want to change my job title now to multimedia specialist, because I'm doing like 70% of my job now is video related.
Okay, so let's start talking about Star Trek Secret Voyage. When did you first get the bug to make a Star Trek fan film?
Friends of mine and I made a fan film back in the 80s. They had some friends that lived up in Spokane, Washington, had gotten together and made a Star Wars / superhero intro to a local comic convention that had come into town. So they put on Spider-Man costumes and were in alley shooting that. They went and did a cantina scene with Star Wars, and they said it was such a blast. They said, you guys, me and my friend Mark, you guys got to come down there and do this with us. So we're like, all right. So we bought plane tickets right out of high school. So we're going to go down there, came down there, and they said, we got everything we need. So we went down there, and the convention was canceled because the Davenport Hotel at the time was being condemned or shut down. So we had, all this time, a whole week, now nothing to film. So we quickly wrote a Star Wars / Star Trek combination video, shot that back in the 80s, and that's even still online available today, called Star Trek Star Wars Crossover 1983. And so that was a lot of fun. That's the background. Okay, so then 2009, 2010, I start becoming aware of a lot of fan films on YouTube, fan films about Batman, Star Wars, Star Trek, and I stumble onto New Voyages. And I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. This looks like something we would have done, way back when. And then I noticed they had gotten a lot better. Because I think they had just released World Enough, the one that had Sulu. That's the one.
World Enough in Time.
Yes, they had just released that one, and I was like, I remember watching it going, I feel like I'm watching Star Trek now, because the lighting's right, the tempo's right, just everything seemed, the sound was right, everything was just perfect. And I thought, wow, how'd they get that far? And that just started,
They had 300 people, many of whom were professionals working on it.
Yes, and a $100,000 budget, find out later. But I saw that, and I thought, this is pretty cool. And it sort of just got me excited about Star Trek again. And so I decided I wanted to get a Star Trek costume, something somewhat authentic for Halloween. And so I'm looking, I got some cheapo stuff, and I'm like, this doesn't work. It's got to be more authentic. And I found some people that actually did more authentic costumes, bought those, and the guy was like, and as a matter of fact, I can have that ready for a Star Trek convention. I'm like, what do you talk about? Because I remember going to those when they were like $15 tickets at one of the local casinos, and they were small, but they were fun. And I knew that they had grown to these, spend a couple of $100 in bigger events. When I was going to them, you couldn't get William Shatner or Leonard Nimoy, any of them people to come to it because it was too small. But now they had blossomed, and so he's like, we can have that. I'm like, I hadn't even thought about that. So I looked into it, thought, the ticket actually is only $30 for a day. So I said, yes, create the costume. I went.
Was this the Creation Las Vegas Con?
Yes. So that was probably 2010. So 2010, I go to that, and everybody was stopping to get pictures of myself and my son. So I was like, the fans are just crazy. This is just awesome. And I thought, you know what? I would love to do another, now later in life, having what I thought was a little bit more professional ideas behind me. I thought this would be fun to redo the Star Wars fan thing that I had done with my friends 30 years earlier. But I couldn't really get very many of them interested because they all had jobs and they were living in different places of the country. So that just got the bug of actually going back and doing this. And so But that's the first thing I did is I went right back to the guys that are in that 1993 and said, hey, I want to do this again, but I want to update it. I want to make it more interesting, more action-based. And then over the course of from 2010 to 2011, we ended up turning it into what it was. And originally, again, it was just supposed to be a couple of friends getting in front of a camera, but trying to put a little bit more of a professional attempt at it. And it kind of got taken away because the more I had to search for people, the more I started attracting some professionals, but they said, I'm interested, but why don't you do this? I'm interested, why don't you do this? And next thing you know, it turns into this huge beast where now it's, I have to do this. I have to spend this money. I have to pull in these extra actors and all this. You know, a lot of people were telling me my passion was so infectious that they said if you could do anything but Star Trek where we could actually make money, I would help you. From professional special effects people to storytellers to producers. They were all telling me, oh, yeah, we could do something with, you know, if we could just do an original story, I could then sell that. And I'm like, man, I want to do that. Because my thought was always, if I can do a Star Trek, I could get an audience. And once I get an audience and some professionalism under my belt, then I could produce my own ideas, my own stories, and I'll already have an audience. Because then I could say, and now I'm doing this project. And so it was always sort of a stepping stone to doing something original.
So you were paying your people. So you were a professional production.
No, we weren't paying anybody. But as I said, I attracted professionals, but we didn't have any budget. And so people like our leading actor, he had apparently done some appearances in some soap operas in L.A. and stuff. But some of these people were like actually contacting me. But they were all willing to donate their time because I guess they saw the passion that I had and they wanted to be a part of it. And I would even ask them, so tell me, why would you possibly want to do this? I have no history doing any kind of a film production, and you're not going to get paid. Why do you want to do it? And either they loved Star Trek or they wanted to build their resume and they really believed in the story and the direction and the passion that I was selling.
So you had professionals, but you weren't necessarily paying the professionals.
Not to the level of what would be considered somebody who regularly acted. I mean, these were people that had some film credit as extras, that level of professional.
Did they get paid anything, like just a token something, or was it like literally, you know, show
Nope.
up and doing that?
They got a DVD if they wanted it, and none of them have actually even today have asked me for a DVD because they can all watch it online. So it was just, I mean, one person I had to pay gas because they were traveling so far.
That was a person from Utah?
Yeah, and I had to pay a sound engineer, but he couldn't do anything to help us on our first episode. But the second episode, he was able to do a little cleanup and help polish that up. So I paid a sound guy, and I had paid for some of the beauty shots, the Enterprise beauty shots, the close-up stuff. I paid somebody for that. Neo Effects, who also does Farragut's stuff.
What's his name?
Stuck. But yes, so he actually, I'd asked him, and he's like, nah, I'm not really interested. Then I put out my first trailer, and he contacted me, goes, saw your first trailer, like what you're doing, I do want to help you. So he volunteered to do a couple of things, and then when I went back and said, I'd like some more, he goes, well, I'll give you a good rate. And so it was a couple $100 to help. He helped us produce the beauty shots that we were able to use in both episodes. And then the rest of the effects were either donated or I did it myself.
Of course, you hadn't done this sort of thing ever before. You pretty much just taught yourself.
Yeah, I put ads out and different things and send emails to people. You know, they were either so busy with other productions or they wanted money, and I didn't have such a thing. Or they said they would help, and then, 1 month, 2 months later, nothing. And, I've met a lot of flaky people.
I know what you mean.
People who are right brain tend to be extremely flaky. It's a wonder we even get out of bed sometimes. But sometimes you have to develop that left part of your brain to keep going. And that's one of the things that I've learned to do in my professional life is to know how to turn that left part of my brain on to get business done. I can't just feel like it all the time. And so I find that people who are donating their time have to feel like it, and they don't always feel like it. So I would be stuck while I'm waiting for them playing around with some of these 3D programs and compositing. And so like I said, when I started this program, I didn't know anything about 3D animation or compositing. I mean, they were foreign to me. I wasn't even expecting to have to necessarily edit, but I was comfortable enough sitting down in a software package and doing some editing. But by the time I was done, I was doing 3D animation and I was doing composite.
So just all self-taught because you had to.
Yeah, it's like I had to do this. It's like I would love for this to have been better, but I didn't have the connections or the money to get people to do it. I see some of these other productions that are like spot on, and I look at them, I go, that was what I mean, my vision was to do that, but I was limited by money and connections to get that. Every step of the way it was almost like, all right, well, what can you do? So it was constantly trying to regroup and push what little we had or push what little knowledge we had, push it as far as we could. So with a lot of experimentation, with a lot of trial and error. But had we had an unlimited budget right off the bat, I could have brought people in to wear some of those hats. But I was wearing like all the hats.
Now, when Secret Voyage first came out, it was a little controversial because your premise was that the story takes place between the end of Kirk's 5-year mission and the beginning of Star Trek The Motion Picture. Most fans had just assumed that the Enterprise, gets parked in dry dock for 2.5 years and undergoes its refit. But you were more of a, let's say that we send the Enterprise off on a secret voyage during that time period. And some fans had a little bit of, shall we say, consternation. You know how fans can be. So can we talk a little bit about first of all, your decision to use the Enterprise and then set it as a secret voyage, and then also what the fan reaction was to that and your reaction to the fan reaction?
I knew if I was going to do Star Trek, first things I wanted to do is make sure that I understood it enough. The last thing I wanted to do was somebody say, that's not how you're supposed to hold a phaser. But if somebody was to tell me that's not a phaser, well, that's your opinion. So during my research, I took not only what was Trek, but what could be discerned from what we know. Because, again, we spent most of our time on the original series in a spaceship, one spaceship. We never got a chance to see what Earth was like or any other ships necessarily day to day. So that, to me, left a whole lot of open ground. Because if I went to a ship out in the ocean and I spent some time on it, I'd get an idea of how the Navy is, but I don't necessarily get an idea what the rest of the world looks like. So I knew I had a lot of openings there. So while I was doing that, looking at what is and what isn't, I was keeping in my mind, just because we haven't seen it on screen through the limited lens of a single set of starship, issues in space, it's looking at what else could fit in that world. So as long as it could fit in that world, then I could basically challenge the status quo. I could look at Earth, the Federation planets across the galaxy. I thought that would be fun. Right off the bat, fans would begin to debate me. They'd debate me on some of my fans having long hairstyles. Never mind the fact that I could find plenty of footage where when they first put Chekhov on screen with that huge, gigantic wig, they would tell me, well, that's not a military haircut. I was like, I'm sorry, what part of Star Trek did you think was military? This is space exploration, and this is the future. Not everybody in there has a military haircut. As a matter of fact, I don't think anybody in Star Trek had a military haircut. And if you look at shots from the 70s, proposed Phase 2, people had really long hair. So I love it when they debate me what they think is real and what's not real. And it's like, that's what's in your head, So, hairstyles, timeline, Federation versus military protocol, et cetera. A lot of people all have opinions about that. But during my reading, I came across this book by J.M. Diller called The Lost Years. And it was exploring, what happened to the USS Enterprise after the 5-year mission? How did that mission end? It had a lot of details about the ship coming into port, everybody saying their goodbyes, everybody saying, getting reassigned, and then it went off into this whole mission where they all were for the next 6 months. But I was thinking, well, that was the most detail I'd heard about what could have taken place during that. And while I was looking at that, I was thinking, well, Scotty clearly in the movie, he was in charge of the refit. Because in the movie they say, he shows Kirk, here's what I've been working on. Well, in that book, Scotty was busy doing other stuff for 6 months. So I thought, wow, there's a 6-month window there where the Enterprise is just sitting there waiting for Scotty to get to work. Now, they could have been tearing off hull and they could have been doing all that, but, as it traces those final hours aboard the Enterprise onto the proposed when they would start the refit, and again, the movie's 10 years after this series got canceled, and so somewhere along the line they decided that it's canon that it was like 2 years. That 10 years was only 2 years. I don't know why they came up with that, but I guess they didn't want the actors to appear that old. So if that's 2 years, that's 6 months, nothing's happening. I thought, you know what? Instead of doing my own ship and all that, I still could use the Enterprise because I thought that would be cool. I thought for the fans to accept anything I produce, it needed to have some familiar hook. And I know Farragut did a whole new crew, whole new ship, and people engage in that, and they got to get used to all of that. If they did their own version of Kirk, boom, you're familiar with Kirk. You kind of think you know Kirk. And I thought, well, at least you could know the Enterprise. And I thought if I create my own ship, then I've got to figure out where's that ship fit in there. Is that can I create my own original? Does it have to be? So there was a lot of limitations to doing that. And if I was going to actually do what I decided was going to be a secret mission that nobody ever knew about, well, that's a perfect ship because it was decommissioned, it was sent for refit, and we had left her available because nobody would have missed it. It was probably mothballed. And so I started thinking, what if a power-hungry group of Federation leaders wanted to negotiate outside normal Federation channels? They'd need a ship, and they could do a small one, but it's a long distance. So I thought the Enterprise was a perfect cover-up vehicle because it was officially out of commission. So that was sort of my idea and my premise.
And what kind of reaction did you get to that? I already know the answer.
Well, people are like, I can't sell. I can't understand why you would use the Enterprise. I'm like, well, people did not like us using the Enterprise because for some reason it didn't fit into their idea of what the Enterprise could be doing. Like they were happier having the Enterprise sitting there in a warehouse with a blanket over it, I guess, than going out for one last hurrah before its refit. But I thought it was a great opportunity because we were going to have to alter some of the technology aboard the ship to get it where it needed to go. Because I had to take the story outside of what we'd seen regularly in Star Trek. I had to take it outside of the explored space. I had to put a new crew in there because I didn't want to try to recast Kirk and all that. I wanted to tell a new story. But I wanted just enough of that Star Trek flair. And I wanted to use the uniforms for the Enterprise. I wanted the Delta Shield. I didn't want to create my own. I wanted when you look at those photos, yes, I feel like that's Star Trek.
Did you use the uniforms from Anovos, or was it some other vendor?
5 different sources. On eBay I bought stuff. I bought costumes from, I had some custom made by James Cawley and his staff. I had some made by Farragut's staff. I bought material from different locations, had some made myself. And then finally we got our own seamstress who was willing to work for nothing, which was awesome for us. So they could do all the custom tailoring and make them look good on our actors and adjustments. I had original designs. I wanted some slight alterations in my costumes. I wanted the gals to not have necessarily the mini skirt, but I wanted a sort of a more of a utilitarian short. And I liked that idea that way because I didn't want my gals rolling around on the ground exposing themselves. I wanted them to be tough chicks that could fight. The way I said is I wanted to be able to kick butt without showing it.
That's very funny.
And so that was the only deviation off the original uniform that I wanted to do. And so I have all those different sources. And, it was much easier for me to get shirts and put the Delta Shield on it than it was to, create my own or go that route. And there was a lot of productions we're already doing, figuring out how to use those ships, use the ships that were left in the fleet, and I didn't want to have to mess with all of that. And really, my favorite part of Star Trek was the Galileo. And so I knew that I could do a lot with the Galileo, and I was more interested in using that than I was the Enterprise, because the original Galileo was destroyed during the episode Galileo 7, and then after that we saw the Galileo as the Galileo 2. So I knew I had the Galileo 2 available to me, and I thought, we never see that again.
Yeah, the way to eat was pretty much it's only...
In my Secret Voyage, my initial thought was the Enterprise is used to get my cast out there, and then my cast becomes lost in space and has to come back basically on a modified shuttle. That puts them out on the other side of space with very little warp drive capability, and there's argument about that, but I stand by the fact that many shuttles had warp capabilities, and the Galileo has no weapons, so those things would have to have been added as she went along the way. But I thought, what a great vehicle for a story that each week they're visiting a new planet, a new civilization, a new adventure as they're trying to make their way back to Federation space, limping along, as you will.
Which, of course, it saves you the hassle of having to create Enterprise sets like, James Cawley.
Perfect. And all I really had to do was create. My initial would be I'd have to create the shuttle, an interior of the shuttle, and maybe I would even have created a 3/4 outside of the shuttle. And then I was going to have to create a Klingon bridge and some corridors. And I had a lot of creative freedom for that, since we didn't get to see a lot of that in the original series. So those sets were the only main sets that I was going to need reoccurring in my series.
So Jones comes back to the Enterprise, and nobody notices that he's a little nuts and looks kind of like, half black and whatever else is going on.
Well, we don't know that. If I'm going to finish the story, chances are he comes on board. You remember the episode where the Mirror Kirk switches place with the real Kirk, and then when we cut back to the Enterprise, and where do we first see the Mirror Kirk? Security's got him, and he's a crazed lunatic, right?
Yeah.
Like he came on board, and they're like, no, you didn't, and they just grab him. I would imagine that was probably the situation with Jones. As soon as he came on board, they're like, something's wrong with this guy. He looks weird. They would have just tucked him in a room and,
So let me ask you the musical question. Why is the Enterprise gone? Why don't they go down there or at least, scan the surface and say, is everybody really dead?
Well, maybe we didn't establish as well, but I thought ship-to-planet communication and scanners and stuff were off and on. They weren't working that well. And so you've got Jones is the next officer, and he's the only survivor, and he's swearing to that fact. So they're just taking him. I mean, it might seem like a stretch to take him at his word, but he had the captain's communicator. They have no way of tracking the captain.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, and obviously I'm sure you've had a whole bunch of people, argue with you and such. And I don't want to, spend the time taking apart your masterpiece, but I was just thinking to myself, okay, I'm not going to take the word of some crazy guy, but if nothing else, I'm going to go down there and get the bodies. And as long as I've got at least one other shuttlecraft, I'm taking a rescue party down there, or a recovery party, whichever way. I'm not just leaving orbit. And, we've got Starfleet equipment down there. We have to pick that up because you do not want to violate the Prime Directive. There are intelligent people that we know of, at least on this planet. We do not want to give them Federation technology. And also, there's a mission to accomplish. We don't just leave, yes, maybe our landing party has been killed and we don't have a captain, but somebody's got to complete the mission. Well, all the things were through my head.
The other idea, I mean, as I said, that's just one possible, but the other idea, and this was the main thinking, is that, remember, this whole thing was supposed to be done under the radar. So let's say you have a corrupt admiral, a corrupt system. This is a cover-up. The most important thing is to get that ship back in time so that it's not discovered missing. So let's say Jones is a little crazy, but he still accomplished his mission. He got the Canaanite, or the quanta lithium, and so they get called back. So Admiral says, leave him.
That's more believable.
And I had two thoughts. I thought, one of the things is there's even debates, because people say the size and reference and everything, but some people actually say that the Enterprise we see in the movies is not the original Enterprise because it doesn't fit. So one of my ideas was going to be that we're just going to take that Enterprise and keep it, and they have to make their own Enterprise and sell it as the refit one. But I decided to let that go because I didn't want to keep the Enterprise any longer than that. But my initial thinkings were we could have two storylines. One is the crew trying to make their way back. The other is back on Earth, this early area of something that could have probably even led to Section 31 being involved to do their own thorough investigation of what's going on. Witnesses have said that they saw the Enterprise leave, and just to try to basically shut down this whole crooked stuff that was going on in the Federation, and then they might even send their own quote-unquote rescue party or whatever to go find this shuttle and find these crew members. But somewhere in the future I saw this scene at the very last of this episode. My hope was to get a few episodes down, and basically you take something that's in like Next Generation Starship is in space, and it's scanning, and it finds an object, and they beam it aboard, and it's an empty quanta lithium chamber with basically a message in a bottle that basically is the logs that our captain shared. So you're talking about it remains a secret voyage until well into the 25th century, and that's why it's just now coming out. But my original plan was never to have this crew ever make it back to Earth.
So the Enterprise gets back, and these guys are basically just dead.
Yeah, gone and forgotten. I mean, they're on their own, and the idea was, because, again, even if they came back, this secret mission would have to be kept secret. And so they would have to be either discredited or they would have to be locked up or something. So I thought, might even just have them never make it back, which seems a little dark, but again, this is a secret. We've never heard about this ever happening before, and I have to make sure that the only way I can have this area to work within is to keep it from ever being canon.
Well, of course, they might just never talk about it, but
right.
That's also possible.
Born to secrecy. Matter of fact, it was as much as a year ago I even considered doing a branch off where I didn't necessarily want to go back to Secret Voyage, but I wanted to continue something. So I thought I was actually in a development of a series called S31 that was going to take some of the characters and some of the stuff that was alluded to in Secret Voyage and create my own series of stories along the Section 31, but I was going to call it S31. And I had some great ideas utilizing that whole thing. I thought a TOS version of Section 31 would have been very fun to explore.
Oh, I think absolutely.
I even got Sean Kenny to agree to come on board, and he was going to be this is great, he was going to be my Pike, because Pike didn't really die, because, Pike went to that planet so he could mentally think that he was whole. There was another person that got in a horrible accident and was able to be completely healed. You know who that was on the TOS?
Horrible accident and got completely healed?
Horrible accident, just like Pike. Crash, completely healed, though. Basically healed himself. He learned this technique and got completely healed. And that was Garth. The mental capacity and the technology was there from another race to heal yourself. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have Sean Kenny everybody thought he was dead, but no, he's actually the director of this new S31 group that would go out on special missions, and they would have to have their own special ship, and they would have their own special technique. Anyway, that's a sidebar, but that was kind of a fun idea that was floating around in my head. Gone like all others.
How long did it take you and your co-writer, John Mess, to create a full script for your first episode?
After I got my initial plot line worked out, he hammered out the dialogue within a month, and then pretty much every day, every week, we beat that thing into submission over the next year or so. I mean, there's so many revisions on that thing. It's only slightly the same script as when we started to what we ended up with.
So you started working on it, say, in 2009?
2010 was the convention, so that's where I got the idea. And I wanted to have a finished episode by 2011. I didn't actually get started till the next summer. So 2011 summer was when we actually started working on the script. Because from the time I had the idea to the time we actually started shooting, we had a lot of changes. I'm not even sure. It's like I brought on John because through the different boards, he actually came to audition for one of the characters. And the character I thought would be best for him, we never ended up actually showing. So he and I worked on that script. He had his own ideas of Star Trek. I had my own ideas. It was a constant battle to get my ideas still in there. And he had a vision that he had that I would constantly go, I can't afford to do that. We can't do that. And so I had to also be the bean counter. So it's like, I can't do a village. Can't have that. So got to stick with what we've got.
So you actually worked up a script because you were then auditioning people for parts.
Yes.
And then he came audition for a part and said, I think your script could be better.
It wasn't so much the script could be better, but rough. I didn't even have it, the script. I was typing it in, like, Adobe Illustrator. I mean, or something like that. Or a Word. I wasn't even using a script program. So long story short, he was the second person to come on board to say, let me take a look at it. And he put it together in script form so that we could first start fleshing these things out with dialogue. And so he came up with most of the dialogue and little side stories as it came through, and then I would go back, we'd revisit those and stuff like that. So, but along the journey, we met people who had other talents. So yeah, would come in there, and he was one of those that he had some experience, not just that, but writing scripts. So I was like, no problem. Matter of fact, with our first day out filming, he ended up working the camera. So he's been one of the important people that I kept close in using so much, and a lot is attributed to his ability to stay with this project, even though he never got to be on screen. I'm sure he was hoping eventually his character would get to be on there, but it just didn't. One of the guys that came on to audition, he brought in some extra technical stuff, and he was one of our doctors. He spent more time on screen, but he had actually a lot more experience with editing and special effects and all that stuff. We just never got to do a lot of that stuff because we didn't pursue the series any further.
Which actually kind of leads to my next question, which is many fan film showrunners like James Cawley and Vic Mignogna and Alec Peters and John Broughton, the showrunners actually choose to be in their productions and often choose to be the stars of their productions. On the other hand, you stayed behind the camera. So why was that? What led to that decision?
Well, I actually was in the film.
But not in a major way.
You're right. The what? No.
But not in a major way.
Like you said, I attempted to be the producer, star, all that because I knew how I wanted it to go, and I figured, I'll be the strongest one, and everybody just has to react to me, right? Because acting is reacting. So originally I was to do all that, but it was hard to wear all the hats. I didn't have any time to sit there and work on blocking or work my lines out with people because I was busy trying to get this thing going or that thing going. And so our first day on film, I got a trailer on set, the cast is getting dressed, and I've got a camera crew that I found on Craigslist. They come down there, and they basically broke our generator and then took off, said they were going to lunch, never came back. And so we're all dressed up, and it's like, now we can film. We have no camera crew. And so very frustratedly, we lived through the first few hours of filming, and I sprained my ankle. And I'm like, that's it. That's the straw that broke the camel's back. This is ridiculous. If I want anything done right, I'm going to have to do it myself. True or false? Well, false, but that was the way I was thinking. So I decided, I'm going to cast somebody else because it is just, I can't even concentrate. I can't give a performance. I can't do how I think I should do this. So I recast a captain. And after about 5 or 6 people auditioning, I settled on Tyrone Lucas. And I decided I would just take care of everything else.
So what role did you end up playing?
I had a cameo as the Russian bridge, Yuri, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was sort of my homage to the role I played in the 1983 video we did where I played Chekhov.
And so you decided to do that old Russian accent again.
So I slightly changed it. I made it a little bit different, mixed it up. I listened to other different Russian accents, and I would say maybe it's more Soviet, maybe Ukraine, but not necessarily Russian. I didn't want to do a Chekhov knockoff. And I tried a couple of different accents and even just playing it straight. And in the end, I liked that one best, so that's the one I chose.
Okay, cool. So you guys were out there the first day, and pretty much that was a complete and total bust. So you had to regroup. You had to basically do your own camera shooting. So this means you had to get camera equipment. You had to do all the stuff that the camera team would have done. How long did it take you to regroup and get yourself back out there and really start shooting for real?
I'd say 6 months. So we did from the summer to just after Christmas because we were not going to shoot over the winter.
So basically you went out there the first day, everything went fakakta, and it took you 6 months to actually regroup and shoot something.
Well, it is actually a little bit longer than that, but we within that 6 month time, basically, yes, it was regrouping. We had to actually recast a couple of new characters. So we did some recasting. We did some retooling of the script. We expanded the cast a little bit more. We got more uniforms because we realized I didn't want to just have 5 people beam down to a planet. I wanted the captain beaming down with a crew already on the planet doing all kinds of things in the background. So we expanded it to a bigger group, and we worked on props. We worked on that, and we did a lot of PR stuff. I had gatherings. We did script readings. We had green screen shooting, and I did a lot of cast shots so we could start doing promotional stuff. And by the time we got back to the location of the desert, it was about 8 months later.
About 8 months later. So that first day or that first half day, what month was that in?
I would say that was like June.
Okay, so you're middle of summer of 2011, and everything goes horrifically wrong, and you basically you go back and say, okay, well, that didn't work. And so 8 months from June, so you're pretty much in late winter, early spring at that point, which I suppose is probably one of your best.
Yeah, I'd say it was starting to warm up a bit. So it was maybe April, I'd say. It can get cold where you don't mind those double knit polyester shirts, but the gals who were in the skirts, a bit cold for them because we did try to shoot some things. If they didn't have a jacket on, they were just doing their lines freezing. I said, can't do that. And the rest of the time, Vegas has just basically three kinds of temperature. We got hot, and we got windy, and we got hot and windy. And most days we would plan to shoot, it would be hot and windy.
Of course, the worst of both worlds. So everybody's doing pickup lines later on. You couldn't use anything that you had outdoors or what?
Well, we didn't do a lot of pickup lines. I mean, we just reshoot, and there's probably a little bit of footage that still had a little bit of wind blown on there. But it's why our audio was so bad in the first episode is just we just never really were able to, because I couldn't wear that hat. We had different people just holding a microphone and listening. And so sometimes they would say, yeah, I'm hearing it, but they weren't really hearing it. They were just hearing us talk. They didn't even know how to listen through their headphones. Like, do you have an iPad? Do you know how? And so anybody who could just hold the mic and stand there, we started, having John Ness, who was my co-writer, he worked the camera a lot, and Robert Shively, who was our Jones, he worked the mic a lot. So the two of them got to be pretty proficient at getting a good signal and listening, and we learned, what channels to actually tape on, and some of the first footage, we even got our audio from in camera, which is even unheard of. It's like really echoed, and we try to clean it up as best we could in post. But
that's why you had to hire a real professional sound editor.
Yeah, who could fix that, So our first one was just, hey, this is what it is,
So it sounds like things were a little rough around the edges on the filming of your first episode. Were those learning opportunities for you? Did you find that things went more smoothly when you produced your second episode?
Well, when we first started, we were just sort of just like running in various directions, trying to figure out what we were doing while we were trying to do it at the same time. Trying to listen to too many voices, and yet trying to stay true to, my original vision. Is certain things we're trying to pull it out of my hands, and then certain limitations, constantly finding ourselves changing this, changing that, and then it became, let's just get this thing freaking done. And then the second time it was taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and looking at, like, for instance, when we first started recording sound, well, we just got equipment and just started recording sound. Well, we didn't know, like, how to best record sound and how to avoid, some of the problems and pitfalls of the environment we were in and things like that. Just recording pictures and scenes, rather than looking at the 180 rule, what's going to be the best as far as lighting goes and things like that. So they were just more production and technical aspects.
So, Craig, when you say that there were a lot of voices, you mean that there were a lot of different people giving you advice and telling you to do this and that?
Right, and some of it was good, and some of it was, like my cast. I mean, I can remember having everybody in sort of the waiting area. We had a warehouse that they used to repair trains in, and we had our whole cast sitting there for 4 hours in makeup waiting to go on scene. And I'm trying to wear that hat and get all the makeup just right, get all that done, then run over and get the location stuff all worked out. Then we run out of time. So nobody got to be shot. I'm paying everybody to be ready to go, and nobody's ready to go. And so I had many cast members who'd been on productions before and said, this is not usually how you do things. And so I'm like, well, I want to know. And they're like, are you serious? I'm like, absolutely. I want to hear it. And so some of it was good, saying, don't bring anybody, shoot what you're going to shoot that day, plan those things out conservatively, and those were good voices. But other people saying, no, don't do that, do that, sort of their vision, they would say, don't do this or don't do that. Make it this way, make it that way, and there. And we had like a technical special effects guy the first day or two we were filming who was going to do all of our special effects. So he's on set. And he's telling me, here's what we got to do, and we got to put these markers, and he's putting these little fluorescent green balls everywhere. And so we shoot all that, and then he leaves the production, and I'm stuck with all this footage with green balls that I've got to, what am I supposed to do with these, Because you don't need those anymore for tracking shots. But, again, just trying to make things work after we'd already shot it. rather than having a little bit of a plan. And as we started learning and going back and listening to audio and hearing feedback and running that through people who we trusted, going, okay, so this is what I should do. Okay, so this is what I should do. And so it was a growing process through that. And so I would say 75% of what we shot in the second half was through our learning curve, the middle of our learning curve. And the last 25% was where, okay, now we have a really good idea what we're supposed to do. So for that last 25%, I was very proud of what we came up with. Of course, you're merging it with 75% of stuff that was in a learning curve. So whereas some productions, they do one show, and then a couple months later, maybe a year, they get back on camera, they take what they've learned, they put that in the second show, and the whole episode has that slight improvement. Then the next one, we were shooting 2 episodes back to back for a huge portion, and then we realized that's like running in 2 different directions. And so we decided, let's just scrap the second half and let's just finish the first half, even if it means going back and reshooting or going back to the sets and all of that. Let's just try to have smaller bite here and deal with that. And so that was probably the smartest thing we did because, unfortunately, when you take too big of a bite of something because you're telling too big of a story with such a big learning curve, it's going to be fraught with problems. But the second half, it was more like we now know where we're going, and I think we can incorporate that in this one. And so I feel like this was a sort of a 50-50 hit. I'd say 50% of it went very well, and the other 50% was still working with the stuff we had originally shot, although we still did a lot of retakes. And had we done a third episode, I think we would have really been able to show where we, how far we'd come.
So when did you do your second filming? It took 2 years after your first episode came out, or your first part came out, to do part 2. But did you film a few months later, or was it actually like a year or more later that you filmed the next part?
Yeah, I'd say it took about a year from 2010 to 2011 to kind of get the framework where we wanted to start producing. And then from 2011 to 2012, we had maybe a 6-month delay from the first day we shot to getting back on track, getting some new actors. And so somewhere in 2011 to 2012, we were shooting simultaneously with a very rough outline of a shooting schedule. So we had probably wasted a lot of time saying, okay, let's shoot this. Now let's go back and shoot the end of episode 2. You're spending a lot of time because you want to go back to that same location. And so I would say that by the time we released episode 1, we had 60% of episode 2 done.
Was that all from the initial shoot, that 60% of episode 2 done, or you'd already done some additional shoots beyond the first ones?
By the time we finished it, we just decided to finish episode 1 because, again, we were working right up into the middle of summer on both episodes. And then when it came time to release the release date that I had in my head, we just, boom, the last month and a half to 2 months, we just focused strictly on episode 1. I looked back and we realized we'd actually shot about 60% of episode 2. So it was just a matter of really going back and finishing that up. We really only had a few scenes to shoot. So maybe out of that 60%, 15% of it needed to be reshot on camera. The other 50% was just special effects. So we didn't need to go back and shoot a cast. It was just going back and doing the shuttle chase scene and some interior stuff. So it came together rather quickly at the end when we finally decided to go back and do that. I think we only had to go back and shoot 3 scenes.
On location.
Yeah, on location to actually finish episode 2. And within that time, too, we had carved and chipped away and even modified it quite a bit. There was a lot of stuff just taken out. So, episode 2 is maybe less than 10 minutes shorter than episode 1. A lot of that was just scenes we thought, this is really not necessary. One of the things I learned was edit. So, if you can cut it out, do it. It doesn't have to be on there.
I noticed that as I was watching it. I was just like, okay, episode 2 is just so much tighter.
We just trimmed a lot of it off. I used to have this idea, if we show this, we could probably show this for 2-3 minutes. That takes 3 minutes. I'm trying to stretch this into an hour long rather than deciding maybe this only has to be 15 minutes.
So the scene inside the shuttlecraft, did you build that set, or did you go down to Georgia and film some of their shuttle set?
Totally CG.
Oh, so even the seats in the back?
I put 3 actors in a chair, a single chair, and filmed them saying their lines.
Against the green screen?
Against the green screen.
Everything else cool?
2 of the actors weren't even able to come back, so I just took a digital representation of them because the cuts were going to be really quick. Had I had to do that over again, I would have even mapped out positions and had the chairs at the angles they needed to be, even done a better job. But I knew it only needed to be real quick, and then I built the interior from reference shots. I re-illustrated in Photoshop and created all the different angles and the layers, and then all they had to do was just film my actors in their chairs, then position them onto the green screens, into the locations of the scene.
Brilliant, Holmes. Brilliant.
I have no background in special effects.
Yeah, as you said, live and learn. Let me ask a quick interruption question, because I'm going to go on to the next question in a sec. But so you said you had pretty much no budget and everybody worked for free, but obviously you did have some expenses. You had to buy all these uniforms. You had to feed these people. You did pay the sound editor guy. You paid effects. I don't know how much you spent in total, but where did that money come from?
My pocket.
Your pocket.
Several $1,000s.
Okay.
At double digits, and I would say probably maybe $500 in donations initially over a 2-3 year period until finishing the last episode. When we finished the last episode, somebody who had seen our Go Fund It or whatever we had done and wanted to give then, but then couldn't find us again, he contacted me through Facebook and said, what would it take to finish the episode? And I said, it'd probably take about $2,500. And so he said, I'll pay it, and I'll continue to help out with other episodes. But he couldn't fund an entire episode. I said, to do an episode each, I'm figuring each episode is probably going to cost us $5,000 just based on what we've done in the past. You've got to keep, costumes are going to look pretty south after every episode. They got to be fresh and new, or we just let them continue to look horrible on this trip up there. So we brought in another executive co-producer who helped us finish up our episode. He even got to do a little bit of extra work. I'd say I got at least a third of that to maybe even half of it back when I sold off a lot of the stuff. If somebody said, this is what's going to cost you to make this film, I would have said, no way. I won't even do it till I got funding. But nobody wants to give you money until they've seen what you've done. It's a difficult thing to try to get all that going from scratch. So, but yeah, you can't just do it for free. And had I tried to do this with like homemade costumes and no money, it wouldn't even have looked even close to being, Star Trek.
I got you there. So as far as your cast went, were all of your actors like real actors, or were there a combination of real actors and just fans? How did
real actors and fans. When I first started this, the first thought was, well, I got a lot of guys who will do this because guys will I'll geek out on it. And so I went to family and friends and, and things like that to get my original cast. And then I thought very rare that I can probably get a gal, but I wanted to have a couple of gals in it. And so I would do a casting call, and then I would have to filter through a lot of people. A lot of gals think they can act. Anybody that I thought could read a line without having to look at their script, and I could believe they said it, that's all I knew. And so I grabbed a lot of people there, or then they say maybe they knew somebody. And so I got a lot of people that had a lot of experience either doing commercials or working as sort of a model, selling something, spokesmodel or booth babe or whatever, you would call them. So they had experience on presentation because I wanted my crew to look fit. No offense to any other crews of other fan films that look like your average Joe. I thought, in the future with the military, I don't remember seeing a lot of people that were slightly out of shape. And so I thought, I want my crew to at least be fit. And so look as good as they could. And, do the uniform proud. So I went through and tried to at least do that. But some of the cast members, like Ben Jones, he's not a professional actor. But in the end, I like his performance. I like his character very much. And I actually thought that he did a pretty good job considering, back in 1983 when I worked with him and he was a Spock character, I thought he created that character in a good way that best worked for me. He ended up being one of the biggest roles with the least amount of background, I think.
Well, I agree. I think he did a fantastic job. I actually thought he was one of the ones who was really drew from the pool of real actors. So I'm surprised to find out that he actually wasn't one of them.
Yeah, he helped build props. He's a technical guy. He works with soundboards. He did a lot more work behind the camera than he did in front of the camera. So I would say he did more double duty than anybody else.
So how did you find your cast members? Did you go to talent agencies? Did you advertise on Facebook or Craigslist? Was it just word of mouth? How did you find them?
Some of the professionals I got were interested in doing it, but they felt like they couldn't act because they couldn't do anything that they didn't get some at least scale, because they wanted to maintain their status as an actor. And I even had one guy who wanted to come do it, but he's like, I can't tell my manager. I'm like, well, this is going to go on the Internet. So, I did not want to encourage anybody to do anything dishonest. And I understand you can do a fan film and not get paid. It's fine to do that, but that's really not the rule. And especially special effect makeup people, trying to find them to do it for no cost, that was difficult. And the gal that stuck with us from almost the beginning straight through, that was mostly used for doing our makeup of our cast. Most of it she did. I would throw her some money here and there to help cover some of her equipment, but that was another expense, but never had to pay her for her time. But a lot of them, they would do it just to get some credit, and then they would move on. Like, we'd get them for one day, and they'd never come back. So, but yeah, through Craigslist, I got some initials. But in Vegas, just like I suppose any town, you bring somebody in, and then they know 3 or 4 people. And so they would recommend some other people. And so our original Andorian, she knew somebody that we could bring to replace our pointed ear gal, because we lost her after day 1 of filming when I sprained my ankle. Just a lot of things changed from the very beginning. I didn't think that she gelled well with the rest of the cast, and I needed a different character. She was a lot shorter, and I wanted a character that standing next to our captain was a little bit more equal. So we recast her. And we had to make little adjustments along the way. Like, we would film with somebody in the background, and then they couldn't continue to get their stuff out and move their lines over to somebody else. And so there was a lot of that going on. At one point, we even had a Playmate model who'd been on videos for Playboy and magazines, and we have footage of her. She wanted to break into acting more. It's funny, I went to a convention, trying to sell this, 2011 convention. Tyrone and I went to the convention. We were handing out cards, trying to create some excitement about this. And nobody seemed to be too impressed with a Playboy model in our cast. Women didn't like it, and the guys weren't going to say they liked it around their girlfriends. So it's like, it wasn't as big of a sell as I thought it was going to be. And after the first day of filming, her schedule got busy, and I think also she saw how unprofessional we were in the beginning stages. We were just scrambling to try to get things done. And so we had to go back, pick up her uniform, and we reshot all that whole landing scene. I shot that landing scene 3 times, where the cast beams in and the camera pans up the Andorian's leg 3 times, 3 different casts, 3 different starts. But that vision has always stayed with me, that you just see that blue leg right up to the cast. That's a scene that got shot 3 different times.
That's funny, because people weren't working out and people weren't showing up. And
yeah, and so, live and learn, And I don't blame them. There's a learning curve. Had I started shooting that film today, it'd be a much different environment. But you don't know what you don't know.
Well, that's true. So tell me a little bit more about your main cast members. What did they do before they worked on Secret Voyage? How did you find them? How was it working with them? That sort of thing.
So Tyrone Lucas, a good background in stunts and small roles in L.A. I think he said his dad did some stunt work too. So he actually found me on the Internet, and so he contacted me through a personal email and tested him. As soon as I put a uniform on him, he had just a superhero quality. And so at one point I almost thought about making him the second in command, because I originally thought there was another actor I thought would be great for the role of the captain. But then when he tested so well, I'm like, no, that guy's got to go. So that role went to the admiral, and then he got the captain's role. And then our Andorian first officer, we had actually 3 different actresses play her. We had an initial one, and after first day of filming, she did the makeup, and she did not respond well to being, that long in a chair. She just didn't like it. She didn't like all the attention. She didn't like all the makeup. So we moved her to a secondary background character, brought in a gal who had to drive actually from St. George, so it's like an hour or so away. So she began that, and she recommended her friend who lived in Salt Lake to come play our Tavas character. And so we did like maybe 2 days of filming. And again, they were rough starts, so we didn't get a lot of footage. But 2 days of filming, and then Andorian, when we said we got to come back, and I was trying to get us sticking to a schedule. And so when I called and said it's going to be this day, and suddenly she had problems with that, I'm like, well, you know what? I told you that this was going to be like this. We were going to have calls for this, and we would have to stick with it, and we got to go. And honestly, I think I was already in my mind where I don't know if she was really doing the job that I needed her to do, and I wasn't seeing it. And so I decided to fall back on another actress who had contacted me along the way that I thought, I got to find a place for this gal. And so I originally thought she was going to be my Tavas, but I just thought, I'll try her out for the Andorian. So I brought her in. She read through the scripts. And I'm like, okay, you're our new Andorian. So we picked up filming again, reshot most of the scenes with her, and that's pretty much our tight crew there. That took a while to get to. But Tyrone Lucas as our captain, Nicole Chevet was our Andorian, and Mariah Smith, or as she went by, Mo Stones at the time. So Mo Stones as our Tavas, and those were our main threes. Those were sort of your Kirk, Spock, and McCoy of the series. None of them were in the original cast, but they're the ones that ended up on film.
So back in the summer of 2012, a few months before you premiered your first episode on YouTube, which I think was in October, but during the summer, at the Las Vegas Star Trek convention, which was at that point officially licensed by CBS, you somehow managed to get a table for your unlicensed Star Trek fan film. So how the heck did you manage that?
Well, because we're in the Vegas area and because Las Vegas is such a huge Star Trek convention, I had spent 3 years going to that convention and promoting this, and I wanted to use that as the unveiling of it. Now, I knew that Star Trek, officially, they didn't want to recognize fan films. And behind the scenes, we worked with a couple people, including Alec Peters, who explained that they have that position. They don't want to recognize them, and he'd been trying to get them to recognize them, too, because he was a big fan of fan films. And so I reached out and said, what is to stop me from paying to have my own booth there and promote it? They're like, well, we don't recognize fan films. I go, I understand that. So I decided to ask the question that nobody would ever ask, which is, can't I just have a booth? I'm a paying customer. I'm not going to sell anything. I just want to have a booth. And so I think that ended up getting forwarded to CBS, who then took a look at what we did, and then somebody from CBS Legal contacted me on email from Facebook and basically said, hey, cease and desist. Said all these things we were doing wrong, and so that gave me a number. So I called the gal, and I don't have her name right off the bat, but she's pretty much the one that contacts all of the fan films. Had a wonderful conversation with her and explained what we were trying to do. She was so open to allowing us to do something that by the time the phone call was over with, about an hour, she's like, all right, you clean this up, do this, and, you have our blessing. Go enjoy your Star Trek convention and have a booth and make your series. So it wasn't an official letter that gave us official abilities to do that. But, one of the things she said, at least make Secret Voyage half as big as Star Trek. So we did that. Get rid of all of the footage you used from Star Trek. I go, we didn't use footage. Those were all original shots that we did. Oh, they look great. Yeah, then you're fine. And
wait, so did you already completed your episode yet?
No,
she
had just seen. She went to our Facebook page and she had seen what we had done online. She saw we had shot our website and our Facebook page, and she saw that stuff. So she did her homework and she came back and said, "Yeah, you're breaking the rules." We were giving away a T-shirt if they donated. She said, "You can't do that." So you can't give away anything, even if it's connected to money. You can't give anything away. If it's giving it away for free for nothing, you can do that. Disclaimer on everything. And other than that, she's like, go ahead. So I called back. I said, are they going to call me or should I call them? So I went back and I talked to the heads over at Creation Entertainment. And I said, I got it. Okay. Is that fine with you? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. So we put our booth up and we released the episode. We rushed to release that episode just so we could show it off, which again, if we'd have spent another 6 months on it, would have probably been much better. But I was rushed to get it done because that was my date, and it was an awesome time. We had a full booth there. We were signing autographs 10 feet away from the entire Next Generation crew who were celebrating their 20th year anniversary. So we got visited by a lot of great people. Rod Roddenberry came over. Alec Peters actually helped us with some connections because I met him in the fan community along the way, and he was very supportive. He brought Gene Whitfield, who was the original production person who did the shuttle, and since we used the shuttle as a major component, he came over to our table. he signed autographs, and somebody then from Vegas brought a piece of the original shuttle that they had bought in an auction in the 80s and had it signed by Gene Whitfield. Rod Roddenberry came to visit. Walter Koenig, who I'd met before, he came to visit. And it was a blast. And everybody was so warm to us, and I think that we were able to do it right. I mean, having our cast show up in costume, signing autographs, it just went awesome. And then after that, Paramount CBS said, we're not ever going to let another fan film do that.
Now, you said that you actually had a good portion of your second episode filmed while you were still working on your first episode. Your first episode came out in 2012. Your second episode didn't come out until 2 years later. So what was it that made the second episode take so long to get completed and released on YouTube?
The short answer is I broke.
You broke?
I just broke. I mean, everything it took to get that thing out there, the high of that experience of being out there and then having to go back under the stress and the strain and, you know, everything that I had put into this thing, looking at the cost financially with my family, and I just snapped under the pressure. I mean, just to get that thing out, I had to have so many arguments with people and crush some relationships, and I had to go make that right. You know, I'm a perfectionist with control issues, so that doesn't fare well in an environment of cooperation. So I took the next year off to just realign my values, my relationships, my goals, and surprisingly did not include Star Trek. So I officially basically shut production down till about August the next year, where I felt like there was enough shot, and I kind of owed it to the fans who had been asking, as well as the cast, to finish what we'd started, because what I felt was some of their better scenes were on the floor, you know, or as they would say, on the cutting room floor. So around August the following year, I began to pull out the footage and play around with some of the scenes, practice some of my special effects skills as I was developing them, using them as examples for compositing. And I realized, you know, I had about 85% by the time that was done. And so the second episode would just take a few more scenes to film. I think we had 300 and something VFX shots to work on. So I could just play around with those things for fun here and there and get the visuals to an acceptable level. And then I got contacted by a donor and helped push things the rest of the way and get that done. So, but that was the short answer. Is I just broke. It was just too much. And I had to decide, you know, this is supposed to be for fun, and it was just a lot of hard work. And too many internet trolls out there do not appreciate all that it takes to do. There's not a lot of people that are actually been able to produce not just one but two full episodes of a fan film for Star Trek, and more people, the vocal ones, all they want to do is nitpick and call you names, and that's not why we get into this. We don't get into this so that we can be harassed. We get into this because we have a love to do what we want to do, and we would hope that people would appreciate that we're the ones creating that content for people to watch for free and enjoy. And we're not asking for your permission or your opinions. You like it or don't like it. Don't watch it if you don't like it. Opinions. Nobody needs you to be critical. We don't need somebody else to tell us what sucked.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's okay to tell us what worked and what didn't, but to tell us why it didn't come off well, I mean, I don't care what your opinion is. Few people give constructive criticism. They give destructive criticism.
Mm-hmm. Amen, Craig. Amen. So last question, is there any chance at all that we are going to see more episodes of Secret Voyage at some point?
No, I mean, absolutely not. I mean, my initial thought was, you know, people vote with their pocketbooks, you know. I mean, I've been asking since day one to support this idea and try to make it better, and I just asked people to come along with the journey. And basically, you know, nobody responded. I mean, it's like anytime you put together a pilot and it's either bought or it's not bought. And we may never see some great show possibilities because we never get to see the pilot. And they're unaired, or they get out there, but they never get picked up. And the way I look at it is this didn't get picked up. And so the story's left untold, at least in that format, because from that point on, I'd already decided that, you know, next thing I do is going to be original, because why not take what I've learned and actually create something that could potentially get money instead of something that's continually becoming more and more restrictive. And so, you know, I've sold off pretty much everything. I have a small amount of stuff I've kept just for personal, but everything, I mean, one guy bought like pretty much everything. I don't know what he's going to do with them, but he bought like 15, 16 uniforms. He bought 5 Klingon uniforms that were never used. He bought all of my phasers, all of my material. he's not going to make any movies. He just bought them all. Like, he's a collector. I have a feeling that in his offices he's going to have mannequins with all of our costumes. And I even put little certificates with each one of them. This is the screen-used uniform for this person, and this is the. So he may someday have his own museum for Star Trek Secret Voyage somewhere out there. I mean, I would have liked to have seen the story continue a little further, but to go further, we would have had to build our own shuttle, and then just a lot of time. And now enough has passed. Now I even think one of our cast members have moved to L.A., and another one is doing different things in life. And, you know, so, I mean, even though it may not be impossible to get the cast members back, it would just seem like it'd be a lot of hassle. So, I mean, long before I decided to pick up that again, I had other ideas that I wanted to do before I realized, you know, I think probably best to stay away from Trek and try to do something more original. And now with the guidelines, I'm certain that's the only way to go.
Well, I'm glad that you had a chance to at least make these 2 episodes for us, because I really enjoyed them. I hope other people enjoyed them, too. Anyway, thank you so much for a really great interview, Craig.
I appreciate you taking the time to let me tell my story.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Take care, my friend.
Thank you. Bye now.